Show me what you got.
How's it going, guys and geeks? Welcome back to the Geekritique show. We are finally getting around to our book club.
Yes.
We would like to thank you so much for your patience and apologize again. It's just been crazy. Family in Florida with Irma. Drama, craziness. Getting a puppy, a whole bunch of stuff. But we are back on track, and we're going to try to keep it that way as much as physically possible. And yeah, let's just get right into it. We're going to keep it nice, short, and sweet for the first week. But a lot does happen that we are really excited to talk to you guys about.
Yes. So we're doing The Wise Man's Fear, which is a sequel to The Name of the Wind. So if you guys are interested in joining our book club and don't already, and haven't already, you can click this link right here to go to our email and send me just show me your interest in joining the book club. Just say book club, and we'll put you on to our newsletter, which will tell you all about how the next few weeks will go in terms of, you know, what to read and how to comment if you want to comment and participate. That said, we only had one participator this week, which is fine.
He's our main man, Graf Fuller.
Graf Fuller, you gave us a bunch of notes, and we'll try to pick apart some of the highlights. But
yeah, thank you for the outline.
Yes, thank you. It was
That's awesome.
Nice. We're gonna try to talk about stuff that specifically we're really interested in this week. We can't really hit upon everything.
Yeah.
But especially because this week a lot happens in the first couple chapters, or in the first handful of chapters, which is what we're doing. We're doing chapters 1 through 13 as well as the prologue. And it's a lot more busy than The Name of the Wind was in our first week. So, Jen, what was what was some of the highlights you enjoyed from?
Okay, so one of the biggest things that happened in this reading for me was after Kvothe was drugged, Ari went to his house and he was like crying and confiding in her about all of the pain that he holds inside and he never tells anyone about. And she was just there for him and was supportive to him, but it was rather odd how she knew where he lived when she never leaves the Underthing.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of the things that she has done in this reading has shown us that there is a lot more to her character than meets the eye. Including the fact that this reading, I think it's chapters... Okay, I don't remember the exact chapters, but basically after Kvothe plays music for her and she requests that he comes back the next day, but he's like, I'm going through admissions this week, it's kind of rough, I'll come back in 6 days. And she says, play for a stone in 6 days, basically. Like, I don't want to wait that long. During that time period, and then when he comes back in the chapter Haven, that is when The Slow Regard to Silent Things takes place, and that is one of the offshoot books that Rothfuss has written, and it's about Ari, and I absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. It's just like one of my favorite short stories, or novellas?
Yeah, it's a novella.
I love it.
And it just chronicles the 7 days of, her meeting with Kvothe to her going back to meet with Kvothe, and what happens in the Underthing, and like a week in her life, which is just bizarre and crazy, and I highly recommend it. I don't know if we'll ever get to it with the book club, but yeah, definitely a fun read.
Yeah, I love it, and I think there's a lot in there that's very telling about the story itself.
How she knew where Kvothe lived
boggles the mind.
Yeah,
it absolutely boggles the mind.
It's such a bizarre chapter, but it's so touching at the same point.
It is, and it's funny because she is really empathetic and in tune with his emotions, even when he doesn't show it. Like, he at one point he says, this and this and that, I'm afraid, but in the casual way that you say I'm afraid, like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to be late today, or I'm afraid the weather isn't fair, and she goes, don't be afraid, I'm here. And I love it. I just think she's so empathetic and loving with him, although it's a little bit creepy, and they're
crazy enough to be like super sweet.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there were a couple of little hints in these chapters to show that both Elodin and Ari seem to know a lot more about Kvothe than he realizes, and he doesn't seem to question that, which I think is interesting, and we'll go deeper into later. I'm going to shut up now. Dakota, what did you like out of this?
I'm actually going to jump off of what you just said.
Oh.
The scene where Kvothe follows Master Elodin into the Master's Hall, or Master's Quarters, and Hem kind of just like brushes them aside and calls Elodin crazy or something like that. Kvothe asks Elodin, will he take him on as an apprentice or as a student in his upcoming class? And Elodin just kind of looks into him like very deeply, very seriously, and it doesn't really explain what he's looking at or why he's looking at Kvothe, but knowing who he is a little bit, you kind of get the feeling that he's actually like looking into Kvothe's person, looking into his mind almost. And it's interesting, the test that he gives Kvothe, which is to open a door that's locked. And ultimately the test amounts to the fact that doors are locked for a reason. And one of the big, this isn't a spoiler, but the third book is called Doors of Stone. Doors are very important in this world. There's many different things like doors of the mind and doors of death and like doors of craziness. That's another thing that we're going to be touching upon later in this book and later in probably the series.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, Elodin asks Kvothe to unlock this door for him, and he goes and he finds a way that, you know, Elodin might not have expected. He picks the lock. So not the classic way of having a key. Kvothe doesn't need that. He can get in a different way. But then he's asking Elodin all these different questions, and he's like, nope, that's not the right question. Nope, that's not the right question. And the question was, whose room is this anyway?
Yeah.
And the moral of the story is you can't just barge into a room without asking any questions, without thinking of it. And that's exactly what Kvothe would do. And that's his problem. And that's what Elodin says. He's too clever. He's more focused on, you know, impressing everyone with how he can open the door that he doesn't even think that maybe you don't want what's on the other side.
Right.
And considering the state of the world that they're in today, you know, where he's with Vass and Chronicler, and he says this whole war, all of these monsters, all of these things going on, it's my fault. I wonder if maybe he opens a door that maybe he shouldn't have, or something that was beyond his control once it was unleashed.
I think so.
So, and I think both Elodin and Ari are extremely intelligent people that just think in an unorthodox way or mask their intelligence with their silliness.
Yeah. And it has been said that the Kingkiller Chronicle is a three-story book, or a three-part book. The 3 days that Chronicler is in the inn that Kvothe is, you know, the Waystone Inn, and he's chronicling his life. But stuff is happening on the outside that we probably won't get resolved in these 3 books. And Patrick Rothfuss has said that there is another trilogy that he has planned after the fact. So it won't be a chronicle of his life, but an extension of his story. So that'll be interesting when and if that ever happens, based on, you know, the amount of time it takes Rothfuss to write. And I'm not complaining about that. I want him to take his time and make the best story possible. Because
he's gonna rant on us in the comment section.
I think there's so much with Ari and Elodin within these chapters that are worth talking about. Before we get into that, though, I want to talk about Kvothe getting poisoned by not any like chemicals or anything like that, but alchemy itself, which is like the study of, I guess, changing elements into desired other forms and stuff. And it's interesting because the Medica wouldn't even be able to help him because it's not like there's something in his system. It's just something changing his system.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like a virus.
It's a virus. And it's an interesting scene because Ambrose clearly hires a female to come, and she's hired to put something on this glass of beer for Kvothe so that he can touch it, and it's absorbed into the skin, as Sim explains later on. And it's good that Sim is his friend because he seems to be the only one who knows that this even exists. That scene in particular was really interesting because we can't tell if she is upset that she's doing this or if she's putting on an act, or as you suggested, she may have touched some of the substance herself and is going crazy.
I feel like that was my impression, but I could be wrong, and we have to go through and reread it. But when Kvothe noticed that it was on her sleeve, I thought maybe Ambrose didn't make it perfectly clear how dangerous the substance is, and she thinks you have to drink it. Because she goes to get the drinks, and when she comes back, Kvoth notices that, maybe the glasses were still wet because there's some on her sleeve. So what I thought was maybe she spilled a little on herself, but thought it had to be ingested, so didn't think twice about it. And then when she sits at the table, she loses her inhibitions and just starts weeping, which led me to the conclusion that, maybe the effects are different. It just reveals what's really going on inside, and she was just miserable inside. So she just started crying. Whereas Dakota was under the impression that she strategically put it on her sleeve to get it on his glass so it would seep into his hand, and that she started crying because she felt guilty and she didn't really want to do that.
That's how I feel. I think she hates Ambrose, obviously.
Like most people do.
Yeah, but it was a good ploy on Ambrose anyway, hiring someone who would hate him so that they could convince both to do whatever he needed to do. So that was interesting.
And then you're first tipped off when he's like just frivolously spending money as he's walking down the street. I don't really care. I'm going to buy that, when we know Kvoth never does anything like that.
Yeah.
Like a couple of days before, he really wanted to go out to lunch with Fela and declined because he knew he couldn't afford it. He's not a frivolous guy.
Graf, actually, you noted that he bought a meat pie on his way back to Hollows. He should be like rushing there, and he's just like, I'm going to buy a meat pie. I thought that was pretty funny. And it's an interesting drug because you lose all moral sense of right and wrong, which is, you think about what that could potentially do in a society like today, or even a society like this is supposed to be, and that's scary. That's nuts.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the Kingsmen, when people just start going like crazy.
Oh, where everyone's like killing each other in the
in the church scene, where it's like they release this, I don't even know how to explain that.
Yeah.
And everybody just goes bananas. Because they even said something like a woman at a wedding like killed 12 people or something like that when she was under this.
Yeah.
So it kind of reminded me of that in a way. It's interesting though, like there is a scene where he asks to see Fela naked, and Simmons like, no, you're gonna like ravage her. And he says, no, of course not. And Dakota said that he didn't really like that part because he felt like it was Rothfuss covering for himself and being like, no matter what, goes on, Kvoth is not a rapist. I took it as Kvoth genuinely doesn't want to sleep with Fela. And it wasn't, because if he wanted to, it would, like, his moral inhibitions wouldn't stop him. He would just do whatever he wanted regardless of how it impacted others or society around him. But I think he genuinely just doesn't view her that way.
Yeah.
He just thinks that she's exceptionally beautiful, but not like emotionally attached to her in that way.
It's an interesting little detail that Rothfuss added into there, and I personally believe that this is just so that he doesn't get any flack on Twitter or something like that, because
which he's known for getting.
He's known for getting flack on Twitter, but I don't want Kvoth to be a rapist. I don't want him to even have those thoughts, but this just felt very like on the nose. He's willing to literally kill. He doesn't see the difference between killing and eating a meat pie. But has he killed up to this point? He hasn't killed anyone. So that's not like that should be like a no-go. Like,
but I think Kvoth has proven
that he can.
Yeah, that he's very capable. Oh wait, didn't he kill those two guys in the alleyway that tried to rob him?
No.
He didn't kill them, he just blinded them and like mutilated them. Oh, okay. So much better. I think Kvoth has this sense, like a very sick sense of justice. And if someone is unjust, he doesn't see a problem with ending them. Whereas someone innocent and lovely like Fela, he wouldn't think that that's just or right or wrong. It's just something he wouldn't do.
True. I guess a sense of just wouldn't necessarily be a loss of morality.
Exactly. Like he still can view something as beautiful, or he can still view something as tasty, like a meat pie, or something as right or wrong. Like he knew that it was wrong that Ambrose poisoned him, and he wouldn't just go, well then again, no, he did pull a knife on Sim.
Yeah. Oh, whatever.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's a tricky thing.
It's a tricky situation. So they're at the Aeolian, they're playing corners. Manette Willem, Sim, and Kvothe. And Kvothe isn't paying attention because he's got other things on his mind. And he makes a bad play. Manette gets mad at him because he's on Manette's team. And he goes, Manette glared at me while he gathered in the cards. Here's a primer for admissions. He held up his hand, 3 fingers spearing angrily into the air. Let's say you have 3 spades in your hand, and there have been 5 spades laid down. He held up his other hand, fingers splayed wide. How many spades is that total? He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Take your time. And obviously it's 8.
And then Master Elodin's first question, when he's going through admissions, is, you have 3 spades in your hand, he said, and there have been 5 spades played. He steepled his 3 fingers and looked at me seriously. How many spades is that? 8 spades, I said. And everybody else stirred slightly in their seats. So if you'd like to compare that, it's on pages 58 and 87. But he is basically saying to Kvothe that he saw that conversation somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It was after Kvothe, he looked into Kvothe's eyes that time, right after.
Oh, that's true. So maybe he saw that.
That's quite possible. Elodin is just so elusive. I can't even begin to imagine like what is going through his mind. The next question he asks Kvothe is also quite interesting, and it's something that you talked about quite a bit during our review of Name of the Wind, is like the moon is very important. So
the moon is highly important. He goes, you want me to take this song and dance more seriously? You want me to ask him questions only a namer can answer? And then he goes, fine. His eyes were dark, his voice had a strange resonance in it. Where does the moon go when it is no longer in our sky? And the room seemed unnaturally quiet when he stopped speaking, as if his voice had left a hole in the world.
And this is clearly a secret that people are keeping a secret. And we don't understand why it's a secret. And I wonder, that's an interesting concept, like where does the moon go after it's out of the sky? Mm-hmm. Something that Kvothe clearly has never wondered before because he didn't have an answer. He didn't even know where to begin. Mm-hmm. I wonder, do they know that their world is round?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because without that concept,
you wouldn't even understand how that works.
Yeah.
And the thing is that so many folktales and things like that talk about the moon, and we know that just based on things that happened in the Name of the Wind, we know that Kvothe does have a gift with naming. Even Elodin in these chapters seems surprised by the name Ari, and he said that it means sunshine, but he doesn't remember what language it's in. And even we saw in the last book, there was a little girl named Nellie, that he called her by her nickname that only her family knew her by. Also the horse, I forget the horse's name, but he knew that what the horse's name was, and called the guy out on trying to scam him without even realizing it. So we know that he does have that ability and a gift with these things.
And he's called the Name of the Wind.
And he also referred to Ari as his little moon fae. So I thought that was interesting because she seems like there's something up with her and the moon, because he always mentions the moon when she goes out. And like Elodin in these chapters has made a few references to the moon. So there's something going on with that, and I don't know what it is. And it bothers me.
Yeah.
Really bothers me.
So, Graf, you do mention in the very beginning of your notes that there's a legend about Kvothe having rings on every one of his finger. And I think it was a smith's apprentice that, like
he remembered the story.
He remembered that little poem. On his first hand he wore rings of stone, iron, amber, wood, and bone. There were rings unseen on his second hand. One was blood in a flowing band. One of air all whisper thin, and the ring of ice had a flaw within. Full faintly shone the ring of flame, and the final ring was without name. Having read this book, we at least know the first hand and the rings of that. We won't get into that because that's something to be touched upon later. Mm-hmm. But the second hand, I'm at a total loss. I'm so confused about that. So that's really something to look out for, especially in this book, because I might be just forgetting about something pertaining to this, but I have a feeling it's something to do with the third book.
Yeah, and I know in a lot of the folktales and things like that, in this world, rings are mentioned. Like in the Lady Lackless poem, she says, "Want a ring that's not for wearing." And I've thought a lot about it, and I wonder if the way stones are like maybe orchestrated in certain rings, almost like Stonehenge.
Yeah,
I've always
maybe.
wondered if there was something with that, and it's somehow a puzzle on how to get into maybe the Doors of Stone or something
The Fey
similar,
Realm or
the
something
Fey
like
Realm. And that's what I wonder if we're going to be heading towards. But thank you for pointing that out, because I remember reading that and being like, that's really interesting. But I was listening to the audiobook and kind of busy when I was reading it. And I'm really happy you brought that up, Graf.
All right, next week we are going to be reading chapters 14 through 32, so do be ready. I hope we can be ready. I know you're going for like a long run over the weekend, so
Pray for me.
maybe you will be able to listen to that while you run. Anyway,
Maybe.
guys,
Not a
thank
bad
you.
idea.
Thank you so much for watching our video and liking and commenting your thoughts. We thank you guys so much, because these videos don't do very well view-wise or money-wise, but it's so much more entertaining to like speak with you guys about all the happenings and goings on of these books. So have a good one. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.